Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Right now, President Trump is looking for ways to strike items from the spending bill that he already approved and he signed. The presidential line item veto has been ruled unconstitutional, but Republicans might have found a way around that detail. It is a little-used provision of the Budget Act of 1974, known as impoundment. How does it work? First, the president selects which funds and programs he doesn't want to spend money on from the funding bill. He then sends what's called a rescission resolution to Congress, detailing the programs he wants to deny funding. It can be several different resolutions or a big one. Once Congress gets the resolution, it has 45 legislative days to approve all, part, or none of the president's proposal. In the House, Republicans hold 238 seats, plenty to pass the request. But the Senate, that's a whole other story. Republicans currently have a 50-47 majority, going to 51-47 when former Senator Tad Cochran's replacement is sworn in. Getting 50 votes, it's still going to be tricky. Republicans still need Democratic support to try to get 12 more appropriation measures through before the new fiscal year starts on October 1st. And if the president sends them a rescission resolution, well, they need to act fast. As of now, there are 63 legislative days when both chambers are in session before the new fiscal year. It is a move that carries immense risk to the future of bipartisan cooperation. Let me just say this one more time. He is looking for an out from the spending bill that he signed and he approved last week.
Let's bring in Forbes contributor and former staffer on the House and Senate Budget Committees, our good friend Stan Collender. Stan, you wrote a column. He's my friend, too. Why you got to sound so much more enthusiastic to see him than I do? We go to the same barber. Stan, you wrote a column in Forbes that is entitled, Trump's latest domestic spending plot may be to ignore the law. What do you mean by that?
Well, there are two things. I mean, Steph did a very good job of explaining the way the law is supposed to work. The president then sends a message to Congress, and if Congress approves it, then they don't spend the money. But my impression is that the president is going to act a little bit more autocratically and decide he's just not going to spend the money and dare Congress to try to stop him. That is, he's going to violate the law, not obey it, not apply it. We've seen him do that before with the $120 million that was appropriated for the State Department to look into Russian hacking of elections, and he didn't spend that and didn't inform Congress of that. So there's precedent. It fits Trump's personality perfectly.
Are there any consequences?
Technically, no, not immediately. Yes, if we raise an issue about it, if people get upset about it, they vote against Republicans at the next election for not taking action against the president.
But that's not real consequence.
Well, no, and if Congress decides not to do its job and provide oversight on another law, then the president gets away with it.
Can this work in favor of the Republicans? Because there are a lot of people who are actually upset about this spending bill and the size of it. There are a lot of comments about how this is almost a Democrat spending bill. The Democrats got what they wanted, and a lot of conservative Republicans don't want this spending bill to be as big
Trump's
as it is.
Base.
So could this work in Republicans' favor by saying, yeah, we passed the spending bill. We went out of our way not to spend the money?
All right, let's distinguish here between the Republican or Trump base, and the overall Republican voters. Remember, if the president is proposing to cut back on spending, it's got to have somebody who's very in favor of it. It's got to do something for certain districts. It will likely be very difficult to get the 51 votes, as Steph mentioned, simply because it will hurt people's constituents. The base will like it. They'll think that Trump's acting strongly as a strong man. But on individual districts or states, it's going to be very, very difficult. So I'm not sure it's going to help overall or in the bottom line.
But what it sounds like is we're going to be left with gridlock. And gridlock is what Americans voted against.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, there's the legal impact of what's going on. That is the president not obeying the law. But there's the moral and ethical impact of signing a bill, agreeing to a deal, and then backing out. And if you were a Democrat, would you ever agree to anything with Senate Republicans again, or House Republicans with House Democrats? Right. Would Democrats ever go along with that if they thought the president was going to simply back out of it?
It is Friday, the 6th of April of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Indeed. Well, it's the weekend, and that means somebody's getting fired, someone's getting reassigned, we might have a shooting war. You just never know when the weekend comes, because that's when the big news happens. And we are well prepared here at Netroots Radio. A couple of little switches and dials to adjust. But when Mueller gets fired, because it is pretty much a foregone conclusion that is what is going to happen, we will go live with Netroots Radio staff and Daily Co's, which is David Waldman and others, and other members of the greater blogosphere, and give you some live coverage and analysis of the event as it's happening. So until they come and get us and take us away, and you never know, it just might happen. So let's see. Looks like they're finally going to impose some sanctions. Now, not enforce, but impose. There's a big difference between imposing and enforcing, because they had some sanctions that they hadn't enforced yet. But it looks like some 7 Russian oligarchs and a bunch of companies and data miners and bankers and whatnot of the Russian ilk have pretty much, been indicted? Yeah, well, Mueller's on their case, and they're part of a charging document, so we'll see how that ferrets out. Blackwater founder Eric Prince lied to Congress about secret meetings with Russian bankers. Mueller has evidence of that. So it sounds like to me, Mueller is about ready to get fired, because things are really coming on down on top of the head of one Donald J. Trump. Let's see. Concerned evangelical leaders finally want to confront Trump on that porn star payout. Or payouts. Porn star payouts, because there's a lot more than one. But they finally want to confront him about that, because they want to know how to do it too. Can we do it too? And then afterwards, they can ask for forgiveness, and all their sins will be washed away. That's how it works. I mean, come on. Franklin Graham's having what's described as a white-hot meltdown after big liberal wins, which just basically shows Franklin Graham as a heretic, and he's not even trying to pretend to live the words of, Jesus Christ. So, I mean, look, if you're going to put the words and the actions of love, forgiveness, and helping the least of these, if you're going to use that as some sort of construct to be able to suck people in, you got to, still further the original documents that you started your grift with. Otherwise, people are going to say, hey, wait. You want me to put how much into the collection plate? All right, Franklin. He doesn't care. The only explanation, obviously, is that brains are wired differently across the political spectrum, aren't they? Oh, boy, BP, I love this one. British Petroleum had some sort of internal memo or whatnot, but they purport that massive oil spills are actually great for local economies because of all the cleanup jobs that they'll get. Now, of course, some economists would say, okay, there's a employment boom during the cleanup period, but how much did it cost for people not to be able to get food out of the ocean? Usually factor in those costs. You factor in costs such as you got a boom of employment and people got to stay somewhere and they're going to pay, but, that's going to be a lot less than the tourist industry that coastal communities usually rely on. What about the cost of that loss? And then you balance it against the supposed gains of this tragedy. But, I would expect an oil company like BP to try to get a win-win, because that's what they're all about. Hey, what are we going to attend to today in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and the Chef's Table? Well, of course, we started off with the only way that Trump's going to get around that constitutional ban on the line item veto is to break the law. But he doesn't see it as breaking the law because he's a mobster. Then on the rest of the menu, the Trump administration wants to cut internet and phone access to poor Americans. And Cambridge Analytica helped Philippines' brutal authoritarian leader Rodrigo Duterte win his questionable election. Tried to say that early in the morning. After the break, we move to the Chef's Table, where ICE has no plans to deport a World War II Nazi war criminal immigrant who even lied to get his U.S. citizenship, while the agency kicks out law-abiding, honest immigrants every day. Well, the Nazi does have, a shock of white hair and blue eyes, I must add. Very, very shockingly blue. And the law-abiding, honest immigrants are brown people. Come on. Who are you going to choose? And as Mueller closes in on Trump, Christian nationalists are betting Mike Pence has been the puppet master they prayed for all these many decades. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to the bottom of our homepage at neverootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link, and our roaring girl, Kelly Lincoln, monitors that rather diligently throughout the day. To the leftish is the donate, contribute buttons, and thank you to those who have recently donated, like on Patreon. Thank you. And I should mention that we will be migrating those links. Hopefully it's painless. I'm hoping I don't have to tell people well, here's another link that you should send this money that you've already sent to. But we're trying to work those details out. So I'm just giving you a fair warning. But thank you for your contributions. We are really unable to do it without you. Bills have to be paid, and we pay our bills. Not like Scott Pruitt, who doesn't even pay a $50 a night rent. God, the guy's not only a corrupt grifter, he's a deadbeat, too. All right, and you can follow me. Oh, I'm sorry. First, follow Netroots Radio at Netroots Radio on Twitter. We, of course, have a Facebook presence if you want to do that. And I'm not suggesting it, but it's there. You can follow me at Justice Putnam on Twitter. And most importantly, I do post a daily Co's diary with the show notes and links and some other, entertaining artifacts on Daily Co's. And I'm there, of course, as Justice Putnam. And you can probably, if you go Justice Department on netrootsradio.com, I think maybe that might show up too. So, but Justice Putnam, all one word. And okay, so what do we have coming up here? Let's go ahead and dive right into these stories. This article is out of Newsweek by Nicole Goodkind. A new rule championed by the FCC chairman Ajit Pai would limit internet and phone access for millions of low-income and elderly Americans. They think it's only black and brown people. Wait until they find out it's not. They're going to be so in trouble. Well, actually, it's even more insidious. Because the program, which currently serves 12 million Americans by providing subsidized phone and internet service, would cut service to about 70%, or in other words, 8 million of them. And many of the recipients live in Puerto Rico and rely on Lifeline for assistance as they recover from Hurricane Irma, and that is the reason it's being cut. Because Puerto Rico is obviously it's not a protectorate of us anymore. They're the enemy. Look at them. Just look at them. They don't have a shock of white hair and these beautiful blue eyes. Well, some of them do have blue eyes. But, they see black and brown people, and that's what they want to make sure. But let's send some National Guard to the southern border to protect us from a marauding invasion of a caravan of millions upon millions upon millions of microscopic black and brown people pouring over the border, infecting our shocking white hair and beautiful blue eyes. Last week, a group of Democratic senators, including Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Kristen Gillibrand, Jeff Merkley, Bernie Sanders, Edward J. Markey, Ron Wyden, Richard Blumenthal, Elizabeth Warren, Dick Durbin, and Cory Booker, wrote a letter to the chairman questioning his motives. The letter also questioned the economic reasoning for the program change. They wrote, "It is unclear why the FCC would spend billions of dollars to expand access to broadband while at the same time make Lifeline less accessible to those who need it most. The Lifeline program is a 33-year-old bipartisan program." Remember those days? Under President Ronald Reagan, St. Ronnie, and bolstered by Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Forget that it was started by Reagan. Obama signed off on it. It's an Obama-era regulation, and everything that Obama signed off on has to be dismantled. Oh, he was an advocate of the Constitution? Well, that just has to go. Anything that the black guy touched has to be cleansed. It has to be bleached out. Everything. My God. Okay, well, Pai says the money will actually help rural telephone companies by encouraging providers to build networks there. Like as if there's competition. Do you really think that Time Warner, Charter, Comcast are going to come out here in rural America and lay, broadband, high-capacity fiber? Do you really think they're going to do that? Jesus. Okay. 550,000 people, or 17% of the total population, use the Lifeline program in Puerto Rico. So I think that what Pi is saying is that a bunch of I don't know, mysterious cable companies are going to go to Puerto Rico and compete with each other to help all these poor people in their terrible predicament. Yeah. Okay. It doesn't make any sense to get rid of a tool that can significantly reduce health costs and cut off communication with Americans after a year with a number of deadly weather events, said the mayor down there, Louis Bellon, CEO of the National Health IT Collaborative for the Underserved, a nonprofit that works closely with the U.S. government and the Puerto Rican healthcare community. This is an expensive tool that saves us a lot of money down the line. Now, of course, the FCC did not respond for comment. Article up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, comes by way of The Hill by Morgan Gestalter. The Hill. Okay, I'm sorry. Sue me. All right. Well, the city of San Francisco filed a lawsuit against supposed Attorney General Jeff Sessions yesterday after he repealed civil rights memos designed to protect minorities and the disabled. The lawsuit targets 6 of the 25 different legal memos that Sessions rescinded in December. Now, City Attorney Dennis Herrera accused the Trump administration of trying to gut protections for the poor, people of color, and people with disabilities under the guise of regulatory reform. Now, let's remember what regulations are for. They're not there to be an imposition upon business because business is the archangel of all that's good and right. Government, and thus regulations, is there to mitigate a problem caused by one or more parties against others, so that we don't resort to fisticuffs or other implements of destruction to get our way. But when you're tasked to destroy America instead of fix it, or even maintain it, this is the kind of thing that you would do. Especially if you've lied a number of times in front of Congress about your contacts with Russia. Sessions rolled back the dozens of legal guidance documents last year. And the lawsuit alleges that Sessions' Department of Justice failed to seek public comment before rescinding the documents and did not provide reasoning for its decision. These documents dated back to the 90s that were deemed unnecessary, inconsistent with existing law, or otherwise improper. Sort of like when the Voting Rights Act was rescinded because there's just no more racism in America. Don't need it. It's good. Oh, look. We're not getting wet anymore. We're standing under the umbrella. It's still raining. No, it's not. Look, it's not raining. I'm standing underneath an umbrella. We're dry. We don't need this umbrella anymore. Okay. The move would do away with the long-standing abuse of issuing rules by simply publishing a letter or posting a web page, Sessions said. Oh, you mean like a tweet? One such document instructed state and local governments on how to accommodate disabled employees and help them integrate into the workplace. The guidance, see, that's a terrible thing. Got to get rid of that. Some disabled person needs help getting into this office. Well, they can get a job elsewhere. Listen. And we have to tell them how to redress their government? Give us a break. And let's see, the guidance protected them from discrimination and complied with the Supreme Court decision on the Americans with Disabilities Act. And another document provided careful guidance about how hazardous it was for local governments to slap juveniles with fines they would not be able to pay back. Do not tell people about that, especially when you have a lot of stock in the private prison industry. Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, is an article out of Think Progress by Luke Barnes. Now, let's be clear. Rodrigo Duterte, a thug mayor known for extreme right-wing sentiments that were totally at odds with really what a Catholic country the Philippines is. Against all odds, won his election to become president of the Philippines. Now, let's also remember that thousands have died in Duterte's so-called drug war. So, Strategic Communications Laboratories, that's the parent company of Cambridge Analytica, previously boasted on its website on how it rebranded Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte into a strong, no-nonsense man of action during the country's 2016 election. In an archived version of its website, first obtained by the South China Morning Post, the parent company talked about how it helped fashion Duterte into an election-winning candidate. Now, the brief doesn't refer to the candidate by name, but it does point to the former mayor of Davao City, Duterte's previous role. Research showed that many groups within the electorate were more likely to be swayed by qualities such as toughness and decisiveness, the website read. SLC used the cross-cutting issue of crime to rebrand the client as a strong, no-nonsense man of action who would appeal to the true value of voters. Let's be clear. This company didn't just arise. Okay, they've been doing this for quite a while. And it might answer the question on how, even with, they got gerrymandering. All of these Republican wins, I always felt, couldn't always be explained by gerrymandering alone. So, they've been working like little eager beavers for quite a while. And we have more Democrats, more liberals, and more of really us voting for what we want than they do. And in spite of it, they continue to win. Unbelievable wins sometimes. I will also mention that this only works on the margins when there's not a very large voter turnout. And that's another strategy, too. You're not only swaying people's minds about who and what to vote for, but you're also trying to sway people's minds not to vote at all. So now, of course, in the United States, Cambridge Analytica harvested personal information from Facebook, unbeknownst to its users, to help micro-target voters with highly customized advertisements. In other words, they were able to brainwash people individually rather than en masse. They didn't have one brainwashing technique that fit all. They came in and custom built the little brainwashing hat that you put on your head for, so you can get the full effect. Okay. Now, Duterte is taking this man of action relabeling quite seriously. His brutal drug war has resulted in the deaths of 12,000 people, and he is being investigated for running a death squad during his time as the mayor. And Duterte has decided to withdraw the Philippines from the International Criminal Court, which is in the preliminary stages of investigating human rights abuses in the country. Police have planted guns, spent ammunition and drug packets on victims' bodies to implicate them in drug activities, Human Rights Watch 2018 report read. Oh, I thought they were talking about Baltimore. Masked gunmen taking part in killings appear to be working closely with police, casting doubt on government claims that most killings have been committed by vigilantes or rival drug gangs. And what an extreme and startling rebranding success that this company provided for Rodrigo Duterte. All right, let's get to our break and we'll come back, go through weather from around the world, and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, why is it so hard to make a good Tomb Raider movie? Is it the star? Nah, they usually do the best with what they're handed, and Alicia Vikander has been great, is great, and probably will be great again. Is it the need to reproduce the gameplay of the video game? I hope not. Those sequences were some of the film's more watchable moments. Is the genre itself played out? Not for me. I love a good adventuring archaeologist crypt dive. So what is it? Is it the slew of tired action movie tropes that we never need to see again? Like the opening action sequence that neither forwards the plot nor reveals character. Like the heroine and the bad guy getting the drop on each other and, against motivation, talking instead of taking the other one out, especially after the villain has shown us how ruthless he is by thoughtlessly killing anonymous captives, anonymous henchmen, whomever. Like the heroine caving into, "Stop, I have a hostage." Like the heroine agreeing to follow the villain's agenda just so we can see her pursue the movie's main quest. Like a boring and poorly examined quest object. In essence, these stories are treasure hunts. To care about the movie, we have to care about the treasure. Like an imbalance between a realistic grittiness and the action melodrama that is the movie's core. Like anything having to do with finding, understanding, living up to, or avenging your dad. I swear there must be a production assistant and 2 mob enforcers in every Hollywood script meeting saying, you know what we could use here? A father figure, or a straight-out father. And hey, you know what we can have then? Some daddy issues. Could continually serving up tired old tropes that we've outgrown be why it's so hard to rock Lara Croft on screen? I don't know. But break out your ancient maps, your hidden codes, and your buried temples, because I know there's a good Tomb Raider out there, somewhere. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2010. That was the day an explosion in the Upper Big Branch mine killed 29 miners. This is the second of 2 parts commemorating that disastrous moment in labor history. The accumulation of explosive methane gas was so pronounced that the mine had to be evacuated several times leading up to the disaster. A 126-page Governor's Independent Investigation Panel report detailed the systemic failures of safety systems and at governmental agencies charged with enforcing regulation. Lack of proper ventilation, adherence to rock dusting standards, and proper maintenance of machinery were main factors. The panel also held the Mine Safety and Health Administration responsible for disregarding the documented risk of methane outbursts at the mine, overlooking the deadly potential of a precarious ventilation system, neglecting to use its regulatory authority to force technological improvements, and allowing the U.S. mine safety system to atrophy. They determined that MSHA could have issued flagrant violation citations and had the authority to shut the mines down, but didn't. important. The report noted the cozy relations between mine owners, politicians, judges, and regulators. Specifically, the ease with which state mine officials move from employment with industry to government and back. Despised union-busting CEO Don Blankenship, who was tried and convicted to 1 year in jail, insisted his mines were safe. He cited 3 Sentinels of Safety Awards received from MSHA in 2009. These awards went to surface mining and coal processing plant operations. Blankenship even blamed MSHA for the explosion because the agency demanded changes in UBB's ventilation system. A union safety committee could have shut the mine down before methane gas and coal dust combined to cause the explosion. If only there had been a union.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Thursday, April 5th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger.
The right to health is the enabler of all health, because without good health, we cannot enjoy other rights.
That is WWII, the Health and Social Sector Officer for Public Services International. The PSI is the global union which represents 20 million public sector workers in 150 countries. It is one of the labor organizations which is organizing events to mark World Health Day on Saturday, April 7th. The major theme of this year's World Health Day is to say no to the commodification of healthcare services. In other words, healthcare should not be treated as a marketable product. The PSI and other organizations are using the day to insist that healthcare is a human right, not a commodity. As part of its campaign for better healthcare for all, the PSI has been conducting campaigns against the privatization of healthcare services. It has also been lobbying against policies which support the pharmaceutical industry's efforts to greatly increase the cost of basic medicines. I talked to Mr. Aye about these and other issues while he was organizing events in Nigeria. We apologize for the faulty telephone connection.
PSI is very much bothered by the state of austerity measures because it has led to undermining the right to health. Since 2007, halting funding of health as a result of fiscal measures, austerity measures have resulted in not less than 150 million people facing economic catastrophe every year due to their inability to pay for healthcare services. There have been decreases from between 4.3% and 14% in the funding for health services in Europe, for example. And in Africa, you have seen decline also. At the pace things are going, less than 5% countries across the world will be able to meet sustainable development goals by 2030. And it has also had great impact on the health workforce because austerity measures have meant caps on wages, on salaries of health workers, as well as non-employment of needed health workers, which is why, as the WHO has projected, even with some 40 million health workers be recruited before 2030, there will still be a shortfall of not less than 18 million health workers. To make sure that this is addressed and arrested, and that means adequate funding of health services and reversal of austerity measures. We do realize that with the contraction of the global economy, there is the need for resource mobilization, but there are several ways to do this. This includes tax justice. We believe that better tax to make sure that universal health care is a reality rather than having austerity measures which impact on the most vulnerable sections of the population, including women and children.
Public Services International has been campaigning against the privatization of healthcare. Why?
Privatization for healthcare, which comes as well under several guises, including public-private partnerships, PPPs, outsourcing, contract staffing, and all that. Because Private business interest is always about maximization of profit. But health is a fundamental human right. The privatization of health amounts to marketization of what is a fundamental human right. What this means, essentially, is that only the rich can be assured of quality health services. And for Public Services International, this is very, very worrisome because it undermines inclusive development, it undermines social justice.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. A temporary exemption for the European Union from President Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs will end later this month. And that's prompting German Chancellor Angela Merkel to plan a trip to Washington to lobby Trump for an extension. Some 5% of all German steel exports in 2017 were to the United States. The end of April is shaping up to be a Eurocentric time for the president. Just days before Merkel's April 27th visit, French President Emmanuel Macron will pay his first visit to the White House at Trump's invitation. While Macron and Merkel will surely talk trade, the Iranian nuclear deal, which was signed by both countries, will surely figure into the discussion as well. President Trump must decide by May 12th whether or not to reimpose sanctions on Iran that were lifted following the historic 2015 nuclear agreement. Trump has repeatedly called on European countries to dial up pressure on Iran as a way of averting the demise of the deal. And Reuters reports the U.S. is poised to levy new sanctions on Russian oligarchs as punishment for Russia's alleged meddling in the 2016 election. The prospect of pending action targeting Russia's wealthiest and most influential businessmen prompted Vladimir Putin's presidential spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, to claim Thursday that, quote, "It's been a long time since there were oligarchs in Russia. There are no oligarchs in Russia." And Peskov may have a point. Russia did resemble an oligarchy at the turn of the millennium, but President Putin offered the country's wealthiest and most influential individuals security if they relinquished political control, and it was an offer most took. What the U.S. sanctions hope to do by targeting those wealthy Russians now, oligarchs or not, is pit them against Putin and make them wish they'd never stepped out of politics. Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. Yeah, hey, get your hopper on. Come on, it's Friday. Okay, let's start off with weather from around the world, and we always begin along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. It is currently 51 degrees. We're going to be a tad warmer than yesterday. We're going to top out about 62 degrees. And it is raining as I speak. And it will be raining for days. So that's okay. My garden needs it, and it looks like our lows are only going to be into the low 50s, upper 40s, which is good. We are under an active wind advisory. Winds currently are out of the east at 5 to 10 miles per hour, with gusts going up to about 25 right now. Later on, they'll be shifting to the southwest to 10 to 15 miles per hour. And hopefully where I'm at, I'm a little protected. So down on the valley floor in Medford and that area, they're going to have some really bad winds, maybe gusts of 60. So be careful. I finally have some air quality index numbers were counted as good at 35 parts per million, though I should say that's right on the cusp of moderate. But that's because people are burning wood in their fireplaces, and people want to do that. Pressure, I believe, is holding at 29.79 inches. Visibility is now down to 2.6 miles. And humidity is 93% because we are raining. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal weather stations that they purchased somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. The guy in London, and it might be a gal. Okay, so the person in London is recording 63 degrees and sunny. Paris is 65 and sunny. Rome is 70 degrees and fair. Kiev is 67 and fair. Kabul is 68 and partly cloudy, and wedding parties are happy about that on the weekend. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and cloudy with wind. Tokyo is 68 degrees and cloudy, and they are under a wind advisory as well. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 56 and rain, and they are under a flood watch. And New York, New York, right now is 38 degrees and cloudy, and they're under a freeze watch. Oh my. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. First article here at the chef's table in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is by Callie Holloway out of Alternate. Now, ICE has no plans, absolutely no plans to kick a lying Nazi war criminal who committed genocide out of the country. Lied to get his citizenship. But they'll kick out law-abiding immigrants of color for, basically protesting that everybody should have due process and equal protection under law. So, of course, Donald Trump has been railing against immigrants in DACA. And policy as treats prove that he does not understand even just a little bit what DACA is. And while he persists in riling his base with non-existent immigration boogeymen, the real deal dwells just hours from the White House. Jackie Palij is an actual war criminal who lied about his murderous Nazi background in order to get American citizenship and is now living out his final years on a leafy tree-lined street in Queens, New York. Despite efforts by local lawmakers to have him deported, the 94-year-old remains in the U.S. unmentioned in Trump's rants and unmolested by ICE agents. Well, come on. Let's be clear. He's 94. Okay? He's just a neat old man. We can't... what happened so long ago. I don't know. Well... He was a guard at the Treblinka death camp where 6,000 Jews were murdered. He was also a member of the armed forces at Troniki extermination camp, where participants in Operation Reinhardt had an ambiguously named plan to massacre 2 million Polish Jews were trained. And according to his German wartime records, they indicate that the guy took part in the bloody 1943 Warsaw Ghetto liquidation. After initially denying allegations by the DOJ Office of Special Investigations, Palij signed a 2001 affidavit confirming his Nazi service. And he'd been living in the U.S. by that time for more than 50 years, having previously lied about being a humble farmer in his native Poland. In 2003, a federal judge removed his U.S. citizenship, and 1 year later a court ordered him deported to the Ukraine. The problem is that the Ukraine refuses to take him. as do officials in both Germany and Poland. And he cannot be tried in U.S. courts because he is no longer a U.S. citizen and his World War II crimes were committed far from American soil. Palige is one of 11 Nazi war criminals ordered out of the country since 2005, nearly all of whom have remained in the U.S. until their deaths. One was successfully sent to Germany, where he died in a nursing home. His body later brought back and buried in an Ohio cemetery. So as ICE steps up arrests of non-criminal immigrants, including an honorably discharged Army veteran, the father of a terminally ill child, farm workers being paid next to nothing, and a college science professor, this guy gets to live quietly in Queens. Well, the real issue isn't whether it's a priority for anyone at the State Department, and generally, I don't think it has been. Stephen Paskey, a former DOJ prosecutor who led government cases against other Nazi war criminals, said, "I don't know for certain what they've done, but I think the results speak for themselves." And he's speaking, of course, about the DOJ. So, let's see. In October 2017, 70 members of the New York State Assembly sent a letter to Attorney General Sessions demanding Palige's removal from the U.S. 4 months later, every member of the New York State Congress signed a letter to then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson urging this guy's deportation. And a press release from Senator Kristen Gillibrand's office states that the missive requested that Tillerson pay personal attention to this issue, prioritize it, and take decisive action to complete this already ordered deportation. But the only problem is there's some good people on the Nazi side, too. They were just doing their jobs, even though Hannah Arendt defined that as the banality of evil.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
All right, finishing up here at the Chef's Table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, is an article out of Raw Story by Martin Sismer. Political scientists and law enforcement agents have spent the last 18 months parsing information to determine Donald Trump's surprising win in the 2016 election. Among the things they've looked at include working-class white people's economic stress, racism, and fear of immigrants. I might also add fear of each other, too. That's a very large component in their wiring. Now, new research from the journal Sociology of Religion points out that when socioeconomic, demographic, and racism are controlled for, one of the strongest predictors of support for Trump is Christian nationalist attitudes. Now, you would expect a white Christian nationalist of the U.S. ilk to, basically fall in step with who they have always defined would be the Antichrist. These are people who believe that America is a Christian nation and want to see politicians push policies that encourage the government to implement their own agenda. Symbolic defense of the United States' perceived Christian heritage is their biggest motivator. Now, Christian nationalism of the Russian Orthodox ilk is used to quite successful usage by Vlad. Christian nationalism operates as a unique and independent ideology that can influence political actions by calling forth a defense of mythological narratives about America's distinctly Christian heritage and future. I particularly love the iconic paintings done in this really, really weird kind of like Kincaid backlighting with Jesus blue-eyed and a shock of blonde hair, almost white. Jesus holding an M16 or some sort of military assault rifle. Okay, Andrew Whitehead, one of the authors of this study, implied that these Christian nationalists may see Trump as a figurehead and see Vice President Mike Pence, a committed Christian nationalist, as the puppet master. These Christian nationalists therefore see this as their chance to have a soft coup in America. Christian nationalist support for Trump is in some ways transactional. Their desire to protect the perceived Christian identity of the country has nothing to do with the religious bona fides of the person or people who help them achieve it. Trump is seen as a tool used by their Christian God to make America Christian again. Was it ever? He can be dispensed with when he is no longer useful, and they know how to do it. All I can say is look at Mountain Meadows. And it's not just Republicans with Christian ideology who supported Trump. Democrats were far more likely to defect if they were Christian nationalists, and independents were likely to break for Trump if they had the ideology. In fact, once Christian nationalism was taken into account, other religious measures had no direct effect on how likely someone was to vote for Trump. These measures of religion mattered only if they made someone more likely to see the United States as a Christian nation. Those who've said that these extremists are hypocrites who have changed their tune to accommodate Trump are not mistaken. In 2011, during Obama's presidency, only 30% of them said that an elected official who commits an immoral act in their personal life could act ethically and carry out their duties in office today. Under the guy who makes non-disclosure deals to silence porn stars he's had sex with while his wife was caring for their infant child. Now, 72% of white evangelicals say an elected official can act ethically and carry out the duties of their office. Indeed, hypocrites all. It's only about power. And I don't know, their idea of power is firmly wedded with their mythology. Okay. I might call it heretical. But I'm just a poet, philosopher, king. Not your rabbi also. Indeed. And thank God, literally, for that. Okay, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and for the week here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we'll be back here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. But stay tuned to Netroots Radio. Today and through the weekend, we may break in with some live content analysis and deconstruction of events as they occur, if and when Mueller gets fired. But there will also be plenty of live content for you to stay abreast of breaking news as it happens out there. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio, and we will visit with you on Monday in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je t'en Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.